Full-day kindergarten is now the law of Colorado.
Jared Polis, Colorado's 43rd governor. Driven, a Democrat, he is a decider. He comes to the office with a significant political pedigree, as well as a sterling business pedigree. An internet multimillionaire with a net worth estimated to be in excess of $300 million. A father, an entrepreneur, a public servant with a passion for education. This Colorado native is setting a new agenda for a state looking for new solutions. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the conversation today. We are originating from the state capitol and the office of the governor. The 43rd governor is just described, Jared Polis. Governor, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure. Welcome to the Capitol.
Thank you very much. I love to ask newly elected governors after 6 to 8 months. So how is it? Is it the job? Is it bigger than you expected? Is it about what you expected? More heavy lifting than you thought?
We have an amazing state, right? So it's really been terrific to really get out all over and represent the state as governor. There's a lot of emotional highs and lows in this position. I mean, you never expect going into it that you'll, the day after a school shooting, be visiting 16-year-olds in the hospital. Which was tough, right? You didn't expect the 2 bomb cyclones, and we lost a state trooper. We've lost 2 now during my time. So, it's always the unexpected, but aside from that, really focusing on those big things that make a difference for Coloradans, like saving people money on health care, full-day kindergarten, all of those really big things that are really what Coloradans want to see going forward.
I want to ask you about those things, but first of all, I want to ask you about the national political scene, because it's a Donnybrook at the moment. There's 24 Democrats. It's the largest field of Democrats in the history of modern politics, and I wanted to know, because you are a political animal and you're a very good politician, as a matter of fact, I wanted to know your perspective. What maybe do all those people know that perhaps that we don't?
Well, I think it's really good for the process to have a lot of people running. I think part of on the Democratic side, you might remember there was a process where there were really only 2 candidates, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and that I think turned a lot of people off, and they thought a fix was in or it was tough. Now it's wide open, and I think what most Democrats want to see, and unaffiliated voters will also be able to participate in the Democratic primary, is this is the audition. Let's see what they got. Give us your best. And it's, having been a candidate myself, I know this is a real endurance test, a stamina test. You see somebody's mettle, you really get to know them intimately. And that's what we're going to see in the coming months. We moved Colorado's presidential primary up to Super Tuesday, so we're going to participate in that on both the Republican and Democratic side. It's very exciting. And our voters in our state will be able to see these candidates up close and personal.
When people say, if you talk to the governor, when they talk to me, they say, if you talk to the governor, please ask him about Senator Bennet and Governor Hickenlooper and what his assessment of their chances might be in all of this.
Well, I think it's great that we have not 1, but 2 Coloradans who are going to be on the national stage in this process. I don't think that's ever happened before. We've had people run like Tom Tancredo and Gary Hart, but we've never had 2 in the same time, and that's a good thing. To the extent they advertise Colorado, talk about how great it is, I hope they do. It's certainly part of their brand, I believe. That's good for our state, wherever their candidacy leads.
Do you think the party needs a new face?
Well, I think all 24 are new to this being president. I mean, so I think it's a challenge. There's different people of different generations, different backgrounds. There's people with military careers, people with careers in public service, people with business background, sort of you name it. And it's going to be an open audition for the next president of the United States.
I know when I talk to people about government and politics, a lot of people tell me, they're really tired of divided government, and I'm wondering if you feel that as governor in Colorado.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I think really the challenge of any governor is to bring both sides together, and I think that's gotten harder than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We see that in Congress, we see that here. It's not because of the elected officials themselves. I think it's because the electorate is more balkanized, and in Democratic circles, sometimes cooperating with Republicans is seen as something bad, and Republican circles seen as cooperating with Democrats is somewhat bad. And it takes our leaders to really rise above that and do what's best for everybody. And always keep it in mind that the single biggest group of voters in the state aren't Democrats or Republicans. It's independents, it's unaffiliated. That's the plurality. That's the biggest group in our state.
You've been very busy legislatively since you took office, and a lot of the discussion has centered around insurance, and health insurance is a big issue for people in Colorado. And I know you have several initiatives, but one of them that's drawing a lot of attention right now is your concept of pooling public employees and having them negotiate as a group.
Mm-hmm. So there is so much going on in healthcare. I wish we could do this whole interview on saving people money on healthcare, because it's not one thing. There's not some magic wand you wave and all of a sudden people pay less. So we looked at all ideas from the left and the right, from across the country and beyond. And I mean beyond because we're looking at importing prescription drugs from Canada at lower costs. Florida, Republican governor, Republican legislature. Colorado, Democratic governor, Democratic legislature. We are both the two states pursuing this opportunity to save money on prescription drugs by safely importing them from Canada, where drugs cost often 5 or 8 times less. The exact same drug made in the exact same facility. Looking at the insurance side here, reinsurance, pooling with the alliance model. Let's talk about both of those. Reinsurance is one of our biggest short-term initiatives to save people money on healthcare, meaning a lot of the stuff we're working on, like prescription drug importation, public option, hospital pricing transparency, will take a year or two before the savings start kicking in systemically. Reinsurance, the savings will occur next year. So that means starting January of 2020, rates will go down considerably in the individual market, which is the piece that it addresses, which is the most price sensitive market, because people who get it through work, of course we care about how much it costs, but you have it. If you are self-employed, a consultant, have a small store, you are literally on the cusp of, do I have it or not? It depends whether I can afford it or not. So that individual market, which winds up being about 8 to 10% of all Coloradans, is the most price sensitive. What reinsurance does is it takes, and it's been done in red states and blue states, and we're I think the 9th or 10th state to do this, it'll produce savings of, depending on where you live in our state, 15, 20%, even in some of the high cost areas, 25% reduction in what you have to pay for insurance by preventing those highest cost cases, those 1 or 2% of cases where it's hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost, preventing those from driving up rates for the rest of us by putting them in a separate pool. Where we then find a way where it won't create that upwards pressure on the rest. One more thing, the alliance model, which is we're looking at statewide, modeled after what Summit County is already implementing for the 2020 pricing session, and they're going to recognize savings of about 20% with this model on insurance premiums. Really using the pricing power that we have, it's like looking at consumers, as having collective purchasing power to negotiate prices with hospitals. And so that's effectively what we're doing. It's seeded by the public side, meaning it could be Summit County employees, they're in it, but it's also private employers. We're looking at this with our state employees, 30,000, seeding it, our county employees, school district employees, but it will also be extremely attractive for small businesses and individuals to participate in this. If you're a big business, you have that pricing power, you have some of that already. If you have 20,000 employees,
sure,
you're probably getting a better deal than a company with 15 employees on healthcare. We want those companies with 15 employees to be able to get that same kind of deal or better than those really big companies.
So they can be in the state pool as well. You would make
yeah,
them
it's not a state pool. It's the state is kind of our 30,000 are seeding it to help give it critical mass. It'll mostly be folks from small businesses and private employers. Summit County is about 6,000 people are part of the Peak Alliance pool. Only a small fraction of those are county employees. I'd have to look up how many people they're county employees, but it couldn't be more than a few hundred of the 6,000.
Right, interesting. So a lot of people are following this because, as I told you, health insurance is such a top of mind issue. And they'll ask me, so the governor's looking at all of these proposals, but is this one of those things that takes years to sew together, or are you trying to get it?
No, it's happening now. This is all
right
like boom,
now?
boom, boom. We're saving people money on healthcare. Our first action, we created an office of saving people money on healthcare. Everything we do is designed less out of pocket, lower insurance premiums, you name it. You saw we capped insulin out of pocket payments at $100 for diabetics. But again, this is 2019. Here we are midway through. Soon we'll have the pricing. We expect a lot of these reforms to have downward pricing, particularly in the individual market for 2020. So Coloradans who pay for their own insurance in the individual market will recognize significant savings in 2020. Depending on where you live, between 10 and 25%. Why? Depending on where you live. Some markets in our state are priced way higher, and that's mostly western Colorado. Right. So Eagle, Summit, Mesa County, Garfield County, they're already paying like 50% more than Front Range residents.
Premiums, right.
So they will come down more, but Denver and Front Range residents will also see reductions of 10 to 15%.
Well, that's a remarkable speed. If it happens that way, that would be a great thing for people in the state. So NBC has this program now. They're asking politicians, what's your big idea? Most particularly those running for office. But and I know insurance has to be one of your biggest ideas. But another big idea that you have is energy. And you want total energy autonomy, or that's what you're shooting for the state, clean energy by 2040.
We try to stay focused on kind of the three big ideas that we have. One is saving people money on healthcare, and that's every piece of it, right? It's not one thing. Second is early childhood education. The state will be moving forward with free full-day kindergarten this fall. That's something we fought for. We want more preschool slots. This is something that families struggle with, those costs, and those early years are incredibly important. The third is really what you mentioned, which is to position Colorado as the leader in this growing renewable energy economy. We already are a leader. We want to make sure that the future works for Colorado, that we create those good green jobs that can never be outsourced right here. We recognize the savings of clean energy. New wind energy costs 20% less than existing coal to power the grid. We're moving forward with a number of things to make our state attractive for those who choose to buy electric vehicles, as an example. This is about a couple things. It's about air quality, and we have a bit of an air quality crisis here in Denver. There's already negative health effects, particularly on the elderly and the young. We've seen the brown cloud. We need to take action. That's automobiles, and that's the grid. We also need to lead with regard to where the future is going. You never want to be in a position as a state where you don't adapt ahead of time. If you are stuck to kind of your legacy way of doing things, you can suffer from the same kind of decline that some of our cities in the Midwest have experienced. They said, we're going to keep doing it the same way, come heck or high water. Maybe they were manufacturing cars, whatever it was, and when the world changed, those cities had huge vacancy rates, huge underwater loans, huge unemployment, and they shrunk. We don't want that to be Colorado. We want to make sure that we're positioned not just for where the world is today, but for where the world will be in 10 years and in 20 years, and then we can retain that leadership role in quality of life and in economic diversity.
And the utilities are on, I mean, obviously you have to work with utilities. You think they're on board with all
Yeah,
this?
we have a broad array of utilities. Xcel, the biggest, is very much a leader in this area. So good prices for consumers, pretty reliable service. And leading the way on green energy. We have municipal utilities in Colorado. The two biggest are the Fort Collins, Loveland, Longmont, Estes Park one, Platte River, and then we also have Colorado Springs. And then we have a bunch of smaller ones. We actually just had some news that the second utility in Colorado will achieve 100% renewable energy now. Aspen was the first in the entire country to achieve 100% several years ago. Now Glenwood Springs also announced that they're at 100%. That's ahead of where the state is. We're not gonna, it'll take us a while to get there, but it shows that you can already do it where you have the will today. And then we have many rural electric co-ops across the state. We have Black Hills and Pueblo, where there's a lot of consumer complaints around their service and their rates. So it's a mixed picture, but overall this direction of renewable energy will save people money, lead to cleaner air, and ultimately whoever the utility in whatever form that take is, that's the direction the world's going anyway.
Huge interest in that in our state, as I'm sure you know. Also a lot of interest in people that I talk to about our Front Range rail line that would start maybe in Pueblo, maybe Trinidad, Colorado Springs, then Denver, then Fort Collins. And I believe that's another big idea that you have, or at least it's something that you champion.
I think we need this. I mean, if you look at the size of our metro area, we're never going to solve this by struggling every 10 years to add one more lane. You wind up barely getting ahead of it by 5 years. With the growth we've had, there's got to be a suburban commuting option for people that competes on time and cost, meaning it's as quicker than your car, and it's as cheaper than your car. Because of course, when you're using your car, it's gas, it's wear and tear, it's depreciation, and it's time. We have good sort of final leg access. If you come into Union Station in Denver, you can do light rail, you can do bus, you can get where you need to go. We have buses in other cities, but we don't yet have that suburban commuting solution. You can't get into where the jobs are, the big job centers, from the Douglas counties of the world, from even the Adams County or Larimer counties, and we have sporadic buses along some of those routes. But for many commuters, the only option they have today is to hop in their car and drive, half an hour.
The last mile conundrum is
yeah, but we view Front Range Rail as a big part of that. It's our big commuting corridor. And we think the only way to really reduce traffic is to provide consumers with an alternative that can compete on time and cost, and that's what we're evaluating with the support of Republicans and Democrats in the legislature.
Right. Would the last mile be a bus solution or a commuter, a carpool?
Yeah.
That seems to be the whole conundrum.
Yeah, and Denver has light rail, I would add, not just Denver, but RTD has a light rail system. There's a bus system. There's also interest in kind of this future of transportation stuff, which means, yes, it's Uber and Lyft, but it also means potentially ride sharing with Uber and Lyft for last leg. So all that, I think, is a net plus, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to deal with kind of the ramifications and make it work for Coloradans.
Yeah, Coloradans so ready, especially in Metro Denver, for anything that helps solve the commute times here.
It's bad. It's tough. Terrible. I mean, and I would add Highway 70 corridor, access to the mountains to that. Another challenge, because it's a big part of our quality of life as Coloradans, especially for Front Range residents, to be able to go to the mountains on weekends. And of course, it's an economic lifeblood of not just our mountain regions, but keep in mind, many of those people come and visit and spend money in Denver and the suburban communities as well. So we've got to solve that if we want to position Colorado to work and improve the quality of life in the future in the face of increased growth.
Right, I-70, a real leap. As a reporter, I've seen probably a dozen different ideas for how we make that work. Are you also looking at new proposals? Well, obviously you're looking at new proposals.
All the above. I mean, we want to encourage creative thinking, right? We're doing the most we can with what we have, meaning we looked at we looked at chain laws, we looked at making sure a number of measures to decrease traffic accidents. We're looking at how we can move forward with more wildlife crossings to prevent people from hitting deer and moose along. So, I mean, there's things we can do, and zip lanes you might have seen that are reversible on Highway 70 westbound and coming eastbound. One of the things I worked on when I was in Congress is we got a fire suppression system in the Eisenhower Tunnel, federally funded, helping reduce closures and increase safety for the Eisenhower Tunnel. So the more we can do with what we have, the better, but that doesn't solve it. We really have to think big in terms of how we can address the needs of that corridor. Certainly part of that is encouraging for tourists westbound access, meaning what can we do with the Grand Junction Airport. We're trying to attract the Bureau of Land Management to Grand Junction. That would come along with increased daily flights to other cities. We think there's a great opportunity for people to come from the west in addition to from the east to relieve some of that traffic for our residents.
Let me ask you, as long as we're talking about federal funds and the BLM, people in Grand Junction, of course, think that's a crackerjack of an idea. Is that a real possibility for us? I mean, are we close to it? Is that another thing that's years away? I mean, what do you think about the BLM?
No, if it happens, it'll be relatively soon. But some of this is not in our hands. It's does the BLM, will they have the political wherewithal to move? Can they move? How many people will they move? And then yes, we believe that Grand Junction is a great place for them to move for a lower cost of doing business, saving federal taxpayers money, but also proximity to the lands that BLM owns and operates, which are really a treasure here in Colorado and across the American West. So there's a realistic prospect. The first action has to come from this decision about whether they really will be relocating and how many people and what their timeline is, and we'll work with them, whatever that is.
Yeah, real plum. Space Command at Colorado Springs, another one of those.
These are great plums. We had Secretary Bernhard from the BLM was in Eagle County just last week. He's a Colorado native, by the way, from Rifle area, which helps, I think, in attracting BLM to our great state. And we had very encouraging conversations about that opportunity, not for the entire BLM to be relocated, but for hopefully hundreds of those jobs to be relocated. We also have several bases here in Colorado competing for the Space Command. We're obviously supportive of all of those, but it seems like one of the Colorado locations is at this point really the favored location where that would likely to be located.
Have to ask you about Tabor, a big topic between now and November. I think it's CC is the referendum. Are you in favor of amending it, of eliminating it? Where are you on Tabor?
Well, I haven't really changed in any of this. People always ask, what do you think of Tabor? I say there's parts of Tabor that are problematic. There's other parts that in our state I think are widely popular. And there's also a lot of misunderstanding about what Tabor is. So I think what is widely popular is people want to be able to vote on their taxes, and that inherently is not really a problem. I mean, the people of our state are pretty savvy about that. I mean, your school district asks for money, you say, yes, we'll give it to them, or no, we don't. And often you give it to them if you know how it's going to be spent, and if it's going to be wasted or you don't trust them, you don't vote for it. The problems with Tabor are more complicated. It's really a lot of the formulas that affect these sort of arbitrary caps regarding how much revenue comes in. They make it particularly difficult to ever recover in the public sector from recessions once they occur. And they also make it hard to keep up with the costs of growth. What does that mean? We've all experienced growth in Colorado. We also know that's led to more traffic. We have not had the ability, even with revenues that we've collected, to keep up with that growth. And so that's really in many ways what any effort to reform TABOR or change TABOR would be about. But I think that people certainly want to be able to retain that right to be able to vote on their taxes.
Right. We have a real infrastructure, well, the country has an infrastructure problem. Is there another solution? Is there another way out of that box?
Yeah, there's the what do you call it, Deus et machina, that the federal government comes in with a $1 trillion infrastructure program and sends it to Colorado. We're not holding our breath. But those discussions are occurring between President Trump and Speaker Pelosi. Again, not holding our breath, but there's some desire that the federal government should play a role in this because we do have important interstate freight corridors, and Colorado is centrally located. In our state, though, we have to focus on doing the most with what we have. We're certainly looking at other transit options. We don't think the answer is just more lanes. If people are choosing to bike to work, to take trains and buses where they're available, that means that those who choose to drive have less traffic. So we're looking at all the different ways that we can impact that.
You're a popular guy, and you really get great press, but you know what? Your family gets better press than you do.
They do.
As a matter of fact,
They got the front
there
page.
they are.
Yeah.
I thought that was really remarkable. I have to tell you, the first gay governor thing was so big in the campaign, but now anymore, and you have a lovely family, by the way, it's kind of one of those things where voters, there's really little discussion. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but there seems to be such little discussion about that. Everyone's looking at you based on your performance as a chief executive, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really thinks that's relevant to how a governor performs. I mean, just because somebody is straight doesn't mean they're a good governor. Those who are not fans of President Trump, myself included, aren't more likely to support him just because he's straight, maybe a little too straight. There's been accusations of
Right, yes.
different things
Yes,
with women.
yes.
But,
16 now.
I don't know how many there are.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, I think people care about, look, is this governor saving me money on health care? Can my kid now go to kindergarten free? Are we preserving our parks and open space and recreational opportunities in our state? Is it getting a little easier to really thrive in this great state? Or is the governor resisting that kind of change in action? And so we're doing our best to align our concerns with those of people of our state, which is how can we save you a little bit of money, help you get to work quicker, how can we make your quality of life a little bit better in our amazing state?
Well, I think you've jumped the shark so far, Governor. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Welcome to the governor's office.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining the conversation today.